experienced a major loss in your life. The National Students AMF Actively Moving Forward Support Network stated that between 35 to 48% of all college students had lost a close friend or relative in the past few years. After thorough research, I feel well qualified to give a speech about grief. The purpose of the speech is to inform you on the different processes of grieving. During the speech, I'm going to tell you about the different causes of grief, the different stages of grief, and the different ways to cope with grief. There are many different scenarios that can cause someone to grieve. WebMD defines grief as a natural response to a major loss. Many people only associate grief with death. However, grief can be caused by any major loss. WebMD also displayed a couple of examples of what could cause grief. Some examples include a terminal illness, a divorce, or even moving to an unfamiliar house. Although these are some familiar examples of what can cause grief, the key idea is that grief is caused by any major loss. According to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book on death and dying, there are 5 different stages of grief. These stages include denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. In the initial denial stage, the individual refuses to accept the reality of their loss. Some examples include not accepting someone has died, or believing a broken relationship isn't over, or a child thinking that his divorced parents are going to get back together. The second stage is anger. This stage only occurs once the individual realizes that they can no longer stay in denial. Anger can manifest itself in many different ways. The individual could be angry with themselves, the individual could be angry with their support network, or the individual could be even angry with someone that's died. In Elizabeth's third stage of bargaining, the individual hopes to delay their loss in exchange for something. Some examples of this include salvaging a broken relationship by asking just to stay friends, or asking God to take yourself instead of someone you love that's dying in the hospital, or even asking God to spare your life in exchange for living a better lifestyle. In Elizabeth's fourth stage, the individual undergoes depression. This occurs once the individual starts to accept the reality of their loss. She states that the individual should not rush past this stage because it means that they are finally starting to process their loss. And Ross's final stage is acceptance. This means the individual is finally starting to make peace with their loss. This stage varies from person to person, and often coping helps the individual get to this stage quicker. Choosing a method of coping depends on who the person is or what situation they're going through. The American Psychological Association has provided a few examples of how people can cope with their grief. They advise someone struggling with a loss to talk to a close friend or a relative. The American Psychological Association also suggests that someone should help someone else going through a similar loss. This would help that individual accept their own loss. APA also suggests celebrating the life of someone that may have been lost. This would help remember fond memories of a lost loved one. In conclusion, I hope you've learned about the different processes of grief, and that this speech may help you. Remember that any major loss can cause grief, and that there are 5 different stages of grieving. And choosing a method of coping depends on who the person is or what situation they're going through. I felt well qualified to give the speech after much research. If you ever fall between the 35–48% of college students who lose a relative or a close friend, just know you're not alone. Major loss can be devastating to anyone, but through proper grief, recovery is possible.